Hello everyone, I'm Jack Fisher and welcome to my world. And in that world, whenever you talk about movies, TV shows, comics, and books, you're bound to encounter certain tropes. Some tropes tend to spark more discussion than others, but those same discussions can get heated, and for all the wrong reasons. And one trope in particular tends to inspire a lot of mixed discussion in that regard, but rarely in a way that's productive. So please be mindful of that, because I'm going to talk about damsels. I know, I can already sense a lot of people cringing, but I promise I'm going to try to talk about damsels in a productive, positive light. Now that may seem akin to juggling chainsaws while blindfolded, but I'd still like to give it a try. Because I think this is a trope worth talking about. Now, when most people hear the word damsel, it often conjures a very specific image and narrative. You think beautiful princess trapped in a castle or dungeon, a dashing hero seeking to rescue her, and a triumphant battle with an evil boss, followed by a kiss of gratitude. It's a story that plays out in centuries-old fairy tales, video games, movies, and TV shows. The characters, settings, and conflicts may change, but the general theme remains relatively consistent. You have a character who finds themselves captured or imprisoned, and you have another character who wants to rescue them, and you have some antagonistic force between them. It's a plot that was often overplayed and overdone, but it was rarely so controversial. That has changed a great deal in recent years. Fans and critics alike will highlight some distressing undertones of this trope. They'll even make the case that damsels reduced characters to prizes, robbing them of any agency, personality, or inherent value. Their only real purpose is to give the protagonist someone to rescue/win/possess. Now, I know that's a gross generalization, and not every damsel plot is inherently bland in that regard. I think the problem is that, until recently, little effort was put into reinventing or refining this trope. Because on some levels, there's still value in the larger story surrounding it. There will always be value in a story about someone rescuing someone they care about. And damsels can still be portrayed in a way that's compelling, engaging, and even uniquely endearing. Once again, this brings me to Megamind. I know I've already made multiple videos about it, but don't blame me, blame DreamWorks. They're the ones who packed so many compelling nuances into this movie. In the past, I've touched on how this movie perfectly parodies a standard superhero movie, and before the Marvel Cinematic Universe began churning out billion-dollar blockbusters yearly, no less. I've also explored how it gave us a uniquely terrifying villain in Hal Stewart, who I still argue is more despicable than Thanos, Ultron, or General Zod. But when it comes to the topic of damsels, Megamind once again gives us something unique, and it comes courtesy of Roxanne Richie. While you might be tempted to call her another stereotypical damsel/love interest, I would encourage you to avoid that assumption. Because in the larger context of the movie, Roxanne is really the true heart of the story. She also redefined what a damsel could be, while also reaffirming their value. That may seem like a lot for a supporting character, let alone a female character with no superpowers or wholly unrealistic personality traits. But by the end of the movie, it's hard not to respect Roxanne's character and what she did for the overall story. As for her part in that story, it largely follows a similar spirit to other major themes within Megamind. Within the first few minutes, we see all these familiar superhero tropes. A handsome square-jawed hero in Metro Man protecting his home city from a self-professed villain in Megamind. Roxanne is also very much a part of that dynamic, playing the part of a reporter, speaking as Metro Man's greatest advocate and acting as a voice for heroic ideals. Now, on the surface, she comes off as a generic Lois Lane derivative. From her looks to her occupation to the alliterative nature of her name. And also like Lois Lane, she is a frequent target for abduction by Megamind. And within just a few minutes of her first appearance, that's exactly what happens. Now, as a prototypical damsel, she checks every box. The main villain abducts her just to lure the hero into a trap. And the hero willingly walks into that trap to rescue her. Place her with Lois Lane or Princess Peach, and nothing really changes. But then, Megamind takes its most dramatic and defining turn. For the first time ever, and defying the expectations of everyone involved, Megamind wins. He defeats Metro Man, and Metro City is now his. This all happens within the first 15 minutes of the movie, and while we don't learn the larger machinations until much later, this sudden inversion of a standard superhero narrative is now the main plot. But even though Megamind is the main driving force, Roxanne still ends up being the primary guide. Because while Megamind is off celebrating his victory, and later dealing with the existential crisis that follows, Roxanne never stops working. The rest of Metro City is still in shock. Its citizens are all in hiding. But Roxanne does not accept the notion that justice and heroism died with Metro Man. She genuinely believes in continuing that fight. That in and of itself is not traditional damsel behavior. When the hero fails, either the damsel stays trapped under the villain's thumb, or they no longer factor heavily into the plot. Remember, one of the most defining traits of a damsel is that they're a means to an end. They're just a way to get a protagonist or hero to confront an enemy or obstacle. But with Metro Man gone, Roxanne is suddenly no longer a means to anything for Megamind. Even when Minion pitches the idea of abducting her as a means to cheer him up, Megamind rejects it. There's just no reason to anymore. As a result, Roxanne's role in general is much less certain, especially through the second act of the movie. But it's also here where Roxanne becomes less a damsel and more a catalyst for how the rest of the movie unfolds. Beyond just being the only one to stand up to Megamind, she refuses to accept this new status quo. She still believes there's more to the story, and she also believes that Metro City isn't beyond saving. There is still hope for those heroic ideals even after the death of Metro Man. And while Megamind pursues that same goal, albeit for misguided reasons, Roxanne goes about it in a very different way. And it's a way that endears her to both Megamind and the audience. Now, some of that involves leaning heavily into certain damsel-like traits rather than subverting them. Before Titan ever enters the picture, she really leans into the Lois Lane archetype, playing the part of a bold reporter seeking to uncover the truth. And she ends up being surprisingly effective, but not so effective that she seems overly capable. Roxanne is still very human, complete with flaws and shortcomings. But it's also that same human side that is so charmed and deceived by Megamind while he's disguised as Bernard. In terms of the larger plot, this ends up being a critical part of the movie, because it's that human side of Roxanne that Megamind ultimately falls for. And it's her skills as both a reporter and a good listener that allows her to connect with Megamind. Because before her, nobody really made an effort to get to know Megamind. Not even his partner Minion seemed to listen to his personal plight. But while he was disguised as Bernard, he actually opens up to Roxanne. And unlike everyone he's ever known, she listens to him. She tries to understand him and even empathize with him. The end result is that she ends up falling for him as much as he falls for her. That ends up making the moment where Megamind's deception fails genuinely heartbreaking. You can see it in their breakup scene just how much it hurts them both. But it's Roxanne who hides the cold, hard truth of it all. Megamind is the one who killed Metro Man. Megamind is the one who took over the city. Instead of simply assuming he'll always be the villain, she highlights his choices. Because that is what ultimately makes a hero and a villain a villain. It is one of the best scenes of the movie in my opinion. It's also a scene that works so well because Roxanne was a damsel. She, more than anyone in Metro City, saw Megamind's choices and his actions firsthand. They weren't just stories, anecdotes, or newsreels. She witnessed his many villainous plots and the heroic actions Metro Man took to stop them. That put her in a unique position to judge and assess Megamind both as a person and as a villain. And it's that same role, her being a reporter and being present for all these past deeds, that make her so vital in the revelations of the third act. Megamind even says it at one point. She's the smartest person he knows. She was the only one in a position to help him learn the truth about Metro Man and eventually defeat Titan. But as critical as Roxanne's role is within the plot, I still think that's not her finest hour. That moment only comes when she confronts Titan, the superpowered incel nerd who's had a crush on her since the beginning of the movie. Because even though she is functionally a damsel throughout this moment, what she does is nothing short of profound. Now, I could say a lot about Titan and how reprehensible he is as a person and a villain. But in this context, you only need judge him by how he understands the dynamic of a damsel trope. Because when he abducts Roxanne, he thinks he's the hero. He's the one protecting the city now, and by the standard logic of the superhero narrative, he should get the girl. But then Roxanne does something unthinkable. She rejects him. She flat out rejects the notion that just because he's the hero and just because she's the damsel, that she owes him love, affection, or anything of the sort. Whereas Megamind earned those sentiments by getting to know her, Titan just assumed he'd have them because he's the hero. But Roxanne dares to show more agency than any other damsel, and Titan just can't handle that. It's the catalyst for his inevitable breakdown and deep villainous descent. Megamind might have given him all this power, but it was this harsh revelation from Roxanne that really pushed him over the edge. And on top of playing such a major role in the final confrontation between Titan and Megamind, Roxanne does something else that is both unique but befitting of a damsel. She's the one who sees through Megamind's deception this time. While everyone thinks he's Metro Man returned to save the day, she ends up being the one to expose the truth. She's the one who ultimately shows Metro City that Megamind can be a hero. And heroes need not be the handsome, square-jawed supermen who look good in a cape. In the end, a hero is a hero because of what they do, not because of who they are. That final gesture, when she undoes the hologram disguising Megamind, revealing him to the rest of Metro City, that really hammers this message home. And it resonates with Megamind. It resonates with Minion and Titan. It resonates with everyone. And nobody appreciates that more than someone playing the part of a damsel. There's so much more I could say about Roxanne Richie. There's so much more I could say about Megamind as a movie. With each passing year, it seems, I find more and more reasons to appreciate it, and the story it told. Roxanne is an important part of that story, not because she's the damsel, but because she did more for that role than anyone could have expected. She didn't have to completely turn it on its head. She even leaned into it a few times. But in the end, being in that role put her in a position to give this movie a much greater impact. Megamind explores so many other relevant themes, from what it means to be a hero, to what makes someone a villain, to what happens when you give certain people too much unearned power. But in Roxanne's case, we get something more tangible and real. Yes, she's a damsel in many instances, but she's also a character who sees heroes and villains for what they truly are. And she is not afraid to call them out when their actions don't reflect their perspectives. And regardless of what role she plays or what trope she embodies, those words carry so much weight. In the end, Megamind might have become Metro City's greatest hero, but Roxanne Richie was always its heart. Thanks for watching, everyone, and thanks for joining me in my world. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and until next time, take care and stay safe.